All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Fort Worth Community Arts Center's Boxed Lunch program. We are in level 12 of this fabulous year that is 2020, moving into the final month of the year, December, and we are absolutely overjoyed to have a fantastic educator and artisan with us today, the one and only James Surls. How you doing today, James?
Oh, I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing quite well and so eager to visit with you today, and just so grateful that you have taken the time to join us here on our Boxed Lunch episodes. James, before we get started, do you mind just introducing yourself and telling everybody a little bit about who it is and what you do?
Well, my name is James Surls. I'm a sculptor. I'm an artist. I write poetry sometimes. I dream a lot. I drift in space a lot, and periodically, the love of my life has to say Earth to James.
Well, you're probably lucky to have one. You know, there's some people that don't have that Jiminy Cricket, sense of conscience near them, and they just run rampant through the world. So you're a lucky man.
Oh, I'm a very, very lucky man. That's a fact. Yeah.
James, before we delve into all of the great items we have to discuss today, what is on your lunch menu today?
It's a breakfast burrito from a coffee shop down in Carbondale.
Nice.
It's called Dos Gringos Coffee Shop.
Awesome. Now, you are from the Texas area, but you currently reside in Colorado. That's where you're at today. Is that correct?
I do reside in Colorado. Charmaine and I live on the side of a mountain out looking over the roaring Fort Valley. We can see Carbondale down a mile or so away, or down. It's actually about 4 miles away. And yeah, I did grow up in Texas.
Awesome. So I have a very important question to ask you. My notes say that you lived in Splendor, Texas, Splendorous, Texas, Splendora, Texas. And I was curious, is it really splendorous?
Well, splendor really has to do with how much you love where you are.
Right?
And I loved being in the woods in southeast Texas, which is where Splendora is. Splendora is about 50 miles north of downtown Houston, northeast. Conroe is directly north, but a lot of water, a lot of creeks, a lot of big oaks and magnolias and pines and sweet gum trees. It's a forest, it's a woods, it's right on the western edge of the big thicket. So yeah, it is as splendorous as one wants to make it. And Charmaine and I chose to make it, we chose to live in the splendor of those woods. Now, it's a pretty rednecky community. Don't get me wrong. It's still East Texas, but I grew up there. So I'm familiar.
Gotcha.
I know how to speak the language so I can function with it.
And did you go to Colorado by choice, or was that work related, art related? What led you up to Colorado?
Well, Charmaine and I started coming out here, when our children were little, really. We had a van, and we would load up the van and stay gone for 3 weeks or 4 weeks and kind of meander our way through the West. And Colorado obviously had a call. It will call you if you listen. And we listened a lot. We drove all over this state. And finally, we were here. We came out here. I had a show, or it was in a group show at the Aspen Museum, and we started teaching at Anderson Ranch, and we just kind of gravitated toward this community. And one day Charmaine just simply said, let's just stay here. And we did.
Awesome. And how long have you been up there now?
We came out in 97.
Wow. So you have been there a while.
We've been here now longer than we were in Splendora, yeah.
Wow.
We were in Splendora for 21 or so years.
Awesome.
We've now been here over that long.
That's really, really cool. And I've been to Colorado a few times, and it truly is just an absolutely magnificent area. And I've been on a couple of vacations up around Durango in that area. And oh my goodness, it is just some absolutely incredible landscape up there. And you guys get all 4 seasons, don't you? At least for a week or two?
We do. It's very distinct. I mean, when fall comes, it's fall all over. It's yellow, and lots of yellow from aspen and willows and cottonwoods, and reds from the scrub oaks. So you get a lot of red and yellow, and yeah, it's just saturated with the seasons.
Yes, and a plethora of things to do up there as well. So I'd love to get back up there soon. So, well, James, I'm going to get started on my lunch as well while we start visiting, and just giving everybody a heads up. Today I'm having stir fry. So we used some Kung Pao stir fry sauce, and threw some vegetables and some chicken in a skillet last night. And I'm going to reheat that today for my lunch. So I'm going to get the oven started. And while I do that, I was curious if you wouldn't mind talking a little bit about how have you been reacting to or been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic artistically? And are you receiving more inspiration from these trying times today or less?
Well, now, if you're addressing that to me, which I assume you are, it's always more. It's always more, I don't know. I guess in a way, that the trying times begets a lot of movement. It begets a lot of kind of internal friction. And as a matter of fact, Charmaine and I are doing a show that opens over in Dallas on January the 15th, a 2-person show. And the exhibition is called Chaos and Mayhem. And it is a reflection on the question that you ask. That is the nature of the exhibition, is chaos and mayhem. I can talk a lot about it, just as a subject, and I can get lost in the weeds on the subject because it is very complicated. It's a far-reaching subject about how we have changed just kind of in our daily thought patterns, because change begets change. Change has come upon us whether we ask for it or not, and we really didn't have any choice in the matter. And some of the ones who have exercised choice, saying, you're not going to tread on me by making me change. I'm not changing for anybody, they almost have become villainous in a way to me, that why can't you step into a new arena and accept it for, what you would call a prevailing wind? If you are caught in a prevailing wind, it's really difficult to fight it, It's better to learn how to soar in it than to be brought down by it. So yeah, it's changed us quite a bit.
Now I'm curious, James. You've been an artist for a long time, and I was looking through your bio, and you've had some great opportunities and some great work all over the world. Now we're looking at a snapshot of 1 year here, 2020, and it has drastically affected the way people operate, the way they think, most people. Now you've created art through a couple of generations now. What do you see, and what's the biggest difference in creating art in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s? And now here we are with such a drastic pivot, if you will, just in the course of a year. How has art changed in terms of creating that throughout these different eras of time? I mean, the 60s had, a lot of the race awareness. The 80s was the me generation. The 70s was just loose. And we had time to adjust to that in these little 10-year periods. And even that seems to have been a huge struggle. What's it been like creating art through all of these different decades? And how does that compare to just this last 12 months, which have been so drastic in altering people's perceptions of things?
Well, it's you really have to address that in terms of the psychological nature of it. I don't know that I would or address it in the physical processes that took place during those eras, because now the processes are different as well.
Yes.
There's a lot of new processes out there. I mean, you can make art now and never even saw a board, or never even hit a chisel, or never even use a piece of sandpaper, or the physical elements of the process are now really this. Yeah. It's really just kind of a matter of manipulating mind images. Even with the physical things, the 3D printing, my God in heaven, people don't have to build these elaborate armatures and clay and plaster, and the physical processes have changed. But also what we're really addressing in your question is the psychological nature of that. And boy, I'll tell you, it's really been heavy the last month. I mean, the last 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 months. I've started making some art. Don't burn your dinner or lunch.
Oh, I won't. Don't worry about that.
Charmaine is making a whole body of work that is about the duality. The warring force in human nature, that actually pushes that paradox together and makes battle. I see a battle going on, and it does have to do with belief systems, and it does have to be with what the subject was earlier in our conversation about truth.
Yeah, no, we talked about that a little bit before we actually went live, and I think it's important, especially where we sit in this day and age, to just go ahead and just move towards that. We've seen a lot of changes in perceived truths, and do you want to talk a little bit about some of that we were discussing earlier? And can you describe to me a little bit about what has become your truth over the last couple of months?
Well, my truth has been pretty steadfast forever, to tell you the truth. I mean, speaking of truth, and no pun intended, but 20 years ago, I was on a panel with a museum director, curator was the moderator. There were 2 other artists and myself, so 3 artists and this moderator. And the nature of the panel was to be doubt. Now think about that a minute. Creative doubt it could be called writer's block. It could be called, just kind of staring at a blank canvas and not being able to start on it. The moderator wanted to know about doubt in our life. And so first artists spoke of the doubts that they had encountered in their time on earth. And so did the second artist. It became my turn. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but you got the wrong guy on the panel. I don't have doubt. I really don't. I don't. I have such absolute belief in the moment of my thinking that doubt is not really an issue. And so the moderator asked me about, well, what does your art mean then? And I said, well, it's about my truth. And she said, truth? Truth? Whose truth? What truth are you talking about? There's no truth. There is no truth, and I thought to myself, God, what bullshit, excuse me. I mean, it's my truth, and artists have to operate under a premise that they are speaking their true value, their true impression, their true interpretation, their true, it has to be some kind of meaning in it that has meaning. And that meaning really becomes their truth. The flaw with that is, and there is a flaw to it, is that you can make up a truth. You can actually formulate and make up one that you want to believe in. And I've done that before, and I can give you an example. I believe this, but I made it up. It's not real. I just made it up. I'm telling you, I just made it up. Okay, I created it. But I believe that the first human being to experience art was a woman. I think it was a female. And I think she did so under the circumstances of picking up a round bulbous stone and holding it in her hand and fondling the stone and rubbing her hands over it and looking at the stone and feeling it, and then feeling her belly. And her belly was round with life in it. So she imbued the stone with life. She gave the stone her life by imbuing it as having some kind of meaning or content. And I think that's where all the stone collecting that people do, by setting a little stone on their windowsill, on their mantle, on their hearth, on the, particularly over the sink in the kitchen, they will inevitably set a couple of little rocks up there, and it's like so human to do that we inherently do that. And so I just made it up that a woman would be the one to make the discovery. I think the man was the one who grabbed her stone and ran away with it, who grabbed her stone and clubbed something with it, who grabbed her stone and made an instrument out of it that hit and mashed. And in all fairness to him, he was on the food chain. He had to defend. He was there to defend. He had to be the tough one, the one that fought the battle. And there was a real beginning there in the development of the male and the female, that comes to bear today. And I just made that up, but it really sounded good to me, and I thought, okay, I'm going to take that on as my truth. I don't really want to impose my truth. If you don't believe my truth, it's fine with me, but when you cross into religious terms, then it's not fine anymore. Then people will actually fight about it, and they'll come to some pretty nasty conclusions about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we talked a little bit about this too. What do you consider the difference to be between faith and truth? If you believe it, is it true? Or do you need the backing and the data and all of that to really be able to anchor into it?
Yeah, of course you do. You need both. I mean, can you imagine if we only lived on one half of our brain? We have two halves of a brain. We have two there that function, a right and a left. And You know, we need the cool, the calculated, the rational, the systematic, the engineered, the scientific, you know, all of those things that can kind of give proof, specific proof as we can see it at the moment, at least. You know, it's the best we can do, you know, to have that kind of scientific reality. I cherish that. I think that we need that. But at the same time, I'm not willing to say I can't cross the universe divide. Yeah. I can do that. You know, I have the ability to do that. There was a teacher, Joseph Chilton Pierce, an incredible teacher. He was not my teacher, except I read his books, you know, but he wrote a book called The Crack in the Cosmic Egg, and how you traverse the crack in the cosmic egg. And man, it's a big deal, you know, being able to go out and wander around in the universe.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example of that. And I didn't make this up. This is real. A little kid staring in the second grade, let's say third grade, they're staring out the window at the snow. And they've never really seen snow before. It's in East Texas. They're looking out the window of a little schoolhouse. It's snowing, and they kind of go into what you would call a trance looking at it. It's, you know, it's what do you do when you actually step into that arena where you're out there thinking like that? And the teacher inevitably will say, come back, little Susie, come back and do your math, come back and do your science stuff that we can prove. Here's what we can prove. But I think you need to do both. You know, I think the teacher should ask that little girl when they're daydreaming, looking out the window, and say, shh, she'll come back in a minute.
Yeah.
And when she does, let's find out where she went. You know,
yeah, and how can we get there?
Yeah, how can we get there? Let's find out what she saw, you know, and let her describe it to us.
Sure,
you know?
Sure. So James, do you believe that art comes from chaos or consensus? Does everybody have to agree that it's art to make it so? Or is it the fact that no one can agree that labels art art? Or is it a mixture, a little bit of both?
Well, I do have a premise about that. I operate under a premise about that. And I think that the artist has to make their art with some intent. You know, if someone says, what is it? What does it do? What does it say? What is it for? Why did you do it? Why do you expect me to look at that? You know, you got to give them a handle on that. It's like a handle on a frying pan. You know, you got to push them down the path. You can't tell them what to see, but you have to know where you want them to go, you know.
Sure.
And I think it's really too bad in a sense that when abstract became in the layman's terms, it's abstract. You don't have to know what it is. It can be anything you want it to be. Well, no, it can't. You know, I mean, come on. I mean, not from the artist's perspective, maybe from a spectator's perspective, you know, it will be whatever they want it to be and they'll go on about their business. But I think that I'm going to give you an example of something that was really, really powerful. And this had to do with the art guys down in Houston who made a piece where they married a plant. The art guys married a plant. Okay, they married an oak tree. And they had a formal wedding where they stood there beside the little oak tree and had an ordained minister marry them. And it so totally and absolutely pissed off some of the people in the gay community that they did that because they thought they were spoofing, you know, the fact that gay people wanted to get married, wanted to have the ability, and took that and charged with it and made a huge, colossal issue out of it. And the flaw in it was that the art guys said, it can mean whatever you want it to mean. So they made They said what they wanted it to mean.
Sure.
And they believed it, and they took it serious. And it caused an incredible fissure in the art world in Houston, because of it. My attitude about them marrying a plant was, man, we should all marry a plant. I mean, come on. It's time in human history for us to be taking plants real serious.
Yes.
We've got to deal with the plant world as though we loved it, and as though we cherished it, and as though we wanted to be nice to it. I'm afraid we treat the plant world pretty poorly. I mean.
Well, yeah, I think that just the audacity with which we traverse ourselves through this fabulous planet has gotten a little bit out of hand, for sure. And we go back to saying what is truth. I know that there's a lot of people in some industries that would certainly disagree with that. And it's very interesting, to look at art in that same lens. And, you talk about having to believe it. I know that a lot of actors and performers spend a lot of time just simply working on the intimate details of playing a carpenter and knowing how to swing a hammer. And if the creators of the art don't have some of their own truth in that material, then to me it becomes very apparent that they're just simply not believing what they say, or haven't had the backing to really to validate those arguments. And I'm still curious to see when we're going to get to a point to where we say, well, we need the trees for air, or we need the trees for lumber. And I'm just afraid it's going to be a little too late whenever we finally come to that consensus that we've tipped one way or the other. And I just really hope that we are able to find some way to appreciate the assets with which we continue to move forward with as humans. And, I just have been very disheartened lately in people's ability to not even agree with the other side, but just simply acknowledge that there is one. Because no matter which side you seem to be on these days. Go ahead, James.
Well, let me give you an example of something. And I don't want to get out of line with this. By that, I mean, I don't want to start kicking in a multitude of directions here. But I belong to a group, a very learned group. Okay, these are successful people in the community who represent what you would call sort of the left in all of its perspectives. And in the right, there are people on the right. The president of the Republican Party in Aspen is one of the members, So there's conservatives and there are liberals in this group. And the point of the group was to discuss issues, come to conclusion on issues. You put up an issue, you discuss it, you have a learned discussion with an educated discussion, and you try to come to the best solution to solve that problem. Well, that's very honorable. That's very, very honorable to do that. But it broke down. And it broke down over a person, an individual, the president. It broke down over the integrity of how the president was interpreted in terms of what he did, his attitude, his perspective, the way he dealt with the world. Okay, it really, the two groups, one group defended him, the other group could not defend him. We could defend policies and we could work on policies. I mean, that part of it is doable, but when the belief system becomes so powerful in a single entity, a person, do you worship the person? Well, now we're into religious stuff.
Yeah.
You just moved over into religious stuff because religions hold up a person to hold on high, to elevate up. I just did a print called Father Rabbi, and it's the melding of a priest and a rabbi into a single focused entity. It's very simple. It's a very simple print, but the intent is pretty powerful.
Yes.
That I think we have the ability to elevate and to, I kind of hold dear a lot of those religious concepts, that, to be honest with you, my atheist friends, and I got a ton of them, got a ton of atheist friends, and they look at that part of the human experience with disdain. They really do, whereas I don't. I know the history of the positive that came out of that. And there was a lot. Now, paradoxically, their disdain is pretty well afforded. I mean, there's disdain there. If you want to look for it, it exists. And I'll tell you this: I just did a sculpture that's called Double Cross. It's a double cross on top of a house, and the whole phraseology around double cross is a negative. If you have been double crossed, that means that someone came back on you that you trusted. You trusted someone, they broke that trust and did something to you that you felt you were really upset about. Then you feel like that there has been an affront on you. Well, I feel like religion has kind of double crossed us in a way, and let me tell you, that's a tough conclusion. I grew up in the Baptist church. I'm a little boy from East Texas who went all through those Baptist world, that Baptist world, So I came into it innocent, as a child, but I actually have come to the conclusion that to be born again really is to acquire consciousness. You go through your childhood kind of, you're semi-unconscious, you're just ricocheting off the world, but at some point, the whole idea about the cool, the calculated, the rational, the systematic, the scientific, all of those numbers, math, I mean, come on, those are important things in terms of giving truth to a premise. And boy, we really need them, I'm just not willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Sure. So to circle this back around to art, James, do you create art to say something or try to change the world, or does the world itself change your art?
Well, all the above. I mean, the world itself will change my art. I mean, I was at a dinner party one night with some art historians, and one of them was talking about how he could look at any work of art, and tell you within 10 years of when it was made. And I thought, okay, if you put a 57 Chevrolet in your painting, he probably could. If you put things in your art that dated it, you probably could. I do my best not to put things in my art that dates it. I deal with metaphor. I deal with kind of the meaning. What is it? What's it for? What does it do? And it's very difficult to date that because that's almost universal. It's applicable. I hope my art is applicable to any generation at any time ever. And there's a certain what would you call it, egotistical belief in myself.
Sure.
I have. I was just, I don't know why, but God gave me that, James, believe in yourself, you know. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit more. You talk about truths and consciousness. What have been some truths that have been revealed to you this year?
Oh boy, man, that people really, really are what they believe. I mean, what they believe so does totally encapsulates them that it's like wrapping yourself in foil.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to it's hard to get out of your beliefs. They so totally define you. In the Kundalini world, the question can be asked: if I lost my finger, am I still me? If I lost two fingers, am I still me? If I lost three fingers or a hand, a whole entire hand, am I still me? I mean, how much of you can you lose and still be you? And the ironic part, or the paradoxical part there is that it is though losing part of your belief system, that's way harder than losing a finger.
Yeah.
I mean, boy, people are not really, that's asking a lot,
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. That has really shown me that people are really anchored into what they say and what they believe. And, I used to think that just a fact-based document had the ability to change someone's mind. And it really seems to be a little bit harder than just pointing out some facts that you believe to be true. How's art going to help us through this? Throughout the history, art has always served a purpose. And do you think that that art will find a way to be a tool for change, or is it just simply a reflection of the time and of humanity? Is it just a mirror image, or is there something deeper there?
Well, there's got to be something deeper there, and it's got to be a mirror image. And it's, I've made drawings back in the 70s called Mirror, 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 Mirror. I mean, you mirror, you mirror, you mirror, you mirror, you mirror. It's like having a discussion, and people can do this, particularly people who know each other very well can get into a ping pong in a discussion. You can you ping and they pong, and there you go. You can bounce this thing back for 1,000 times, but nothing really happened. There was no change. No one said, "Oh my goodness, maybe I was wrong on that one."
Sure.
Believe it or not, that is something that is there now. Between Charmaine and I, which it makes it very, very, very personal. Okay. We're having an exhibition together, and we are talking about this exhibition, and we're discussing this exhibition. And I have a tendency to so totally believe in what I am doing that I can almost be like the dark horse running for the creek water. I can just, I mean, that's it. I'm gone. I mean, when I break out of the chute, I mean, I just, that's it. I go. Whereas she is much more methodic and really thinks things through. And looking back on our life together, I can tell you that there are more than once, there are several times where she said, "James, don't do that. James, don't do that. James, don't do that." And then I did anyway. And then I had to say, "Oh shit." That was a mistake, So it really does behoove me, to tell you the truth, to be willing to say, "Oh, okay, stop. Just put this on hold for a minute, an hour, a day, just put this one, shelve this one, you know. I'll give you a humorous example of something. Once Charmaine and I were driving down the highway, coming back out of Houston, and she was driving and I was staring out the window going snake eyes on the universe. And she said, "What are you thinking?" So I told her, and she said, "Oh my goodness, how much will that cost?" And I paused for a while and said, "Well, I don't know, maybe $150,000. And she didn't say anything. And then a few minutes later, I said, "I don't think I'll do that." And then she said, "Well, since we saved all that money, let's go to dinner."
Now that is a truth.
I mean, sometimes you just have to, I won't say change, but you have to be willing to broken feel run, to get to where you need to go. And if you are only laser beamed, you will hit things. I mean, you will just hit things, and man, it's tough,
Yeah, absolutely. Now I'm curious, James, I'm going to put you on the spot again here. Now you made mention about a little girl in a room daydreaming in the middle of class and that teacher allowing that to happen. Does your wife wait till you come back, or does she give you the old, "Hey, James"?
No, my goodness. There's nothing like patience. There's nothing like patience. And man, she's very patient with me. I mean, now she can lose it periodically when I don't take the trash out.
So, James, we've talked a lot about truth, faith, perceptions. You made mention that all this kind of ties into your newest work. Do you mind talking a little bit about some of those themes?
Well, duality, paradox is part of the theme. This body of work kind of came from what I would call a rough God sensibility. That in and of itself is a statement, that let's assume for a minute that God exists. Well, if we're going to assume that, then I'm going to have to personally assume it's a pretty rough character. I mean, man alive, come on, it's a pretty rough character. I don't want to labor this, but if you go back into the 20th century, there were like 200 million people killed in the 20th century at the hands of other people.
Yes.
Lions and tigers and bears didn't kill all those people. Humans killed them. I mean, my God in heaven, I mean, huge swaths of groups of people, man, it was a tough century.
Yes.
I'm just wondering what we've learned. I mean, how do we equate that and put that in art where it has some significance? That's I mean, come on, art's not really about being Charlie Tuna.
Yeah.
You don't just have to taste good.
Yep.
You don't have to just look good. Art that hangs on the wall and look good may not be necessarily great art in the first place.
Yeah.
I mean, what makes it great? Well, meaning and content and seriousness and the intent of the artist. They got to really, you got to be putting something in there. If you're fluffing around, well, then you're a great fluffer.
Yeah.
But I don't know that that's enough.
Well, I think in this day and age, it's one of the arguments that people have a lot. I hear the word entertainment thrown around a lot. Well, it just needs to be entertainment, or I'm just looking to be entertained. And to me, that's different than artists, because I do believe that they're trying to do something a little deeper than just entertain you or um, placate, whatever synonym you want to use with that. And do you feel like it is more about the artist intent or the reception from the audience and the viewer? And is it enough to just entertain? Is that artistic?
Well, we as visual artists, I mean, we could say we've got a stage, and that stage is where? A gallery, a museum, or where a pop-up down at the, local shopping center. I mean, where do you show it?
Sure.
Making it and showing it is the two big factors there. Entertainers, they really do have a stage where there's an audience. You gotta buy a ticket. You got to go buy a ticket and go in and have a seat. So entertainment really is different than what we do. I mean, we have an opening. What 100 people comes to the opening. You see 50 of them that say, "Oh, James, that's nice." "Oh, wonderful. Oh, that's nice." But how many one-on-one relationships does that piece of art have with somebody? You have to stop and look at it.
Yeah.
You got to actually say, "Art, what are you now? What are you doing? What are you telling me?" You got to give it a shot. I mean, I used to use this as an example. If you spend an hour at a museum, you walk into the main hall and you spend an hour in that museum. And let's just hypothetically say there's 60 works of art in it. Okay, well, that's a minute per piece. So that's 60 seconds you've got per piece. If you are 100% on for the whole entire hour, which you won't be, you will daydream for a minute or two here and there and yonder. You'll talk to a friend. You may go out and schmooze the bookstore. You'll go to the restroom. You'll stare at the ceiling. You'll think about what you have to do tomorrow. Your mind is ricocheting all over that room. So the time on task with art really gets down into the pretty low seconds, to tell you the truth. That's 60 seconds that you had. You could very easily take 50 of those seconds and just throw them away. Time on task of looking at the art and dealing with the art and conversing with the art, it's very limited. That's not the case with movies and
Right. Streaming and everything, just sitting in a closet for you to digest at your own, accord. So
yeah.
It's funny you say that. I saw a piece a couple of years ago, and I'm gonna say the artist's name wrong. I'm not even gonna try. She paints all the polka dots, and she had an exhibit over in Dallas where you only had a minute to walk in and look at it. And I find it so interesting because I thought, to myself, wow, I wish I had more time. But it's really interesting to hear you say that choice of only having 60 seconds really forced me to let go of all of these other things in my head at that moment and really hone in on what it was that I was trying to get out of that particular exhibit. And so it's really interesting to hear you say that, and so truthful in hindsight that when I walked in and they shut the door and I knew that timer was on me, even then, I still had to take portions of my brain and force out all of those things trying to creep in, knowing how limited and how important it was for me to focus on what it was I was there to see.
Well, it's human nature. It's really human nature. There's another part of it that comes to bear now in terms of entertainment as opposed to what the alternative to entertainment is. But I have always thought you could have, let's just say, a brilliant scientific lecturer or historian, and they're there to speak about a particular subject, and they're brilliant. Or you could go do that. You could go hear that person, or you could watch a python eat a pig out in the front yard. You know, where do you think people are going to go?
Yes.
You know?
Oh, trust me, I love the analogy, and I would say that might be a little overzealous to mention a python and a pig, but I think you're pretty spot on these days.
A lot of pythons and pigs out there.
Oh my goodness gracious. Yes, indeed. So James, is one person enough to validate art, or do you need multiple people to get behind it to really give it value? Is it enough for one person to say, man, that touched me, that's art, that's the best thing I've ever seen?
Yeah, think about this a minute. A grandmother, a 90-year-old grandmother passes away, and her grandchildren and a couple of her children find in her attic 1,000 paintings of roses that this grandmother had been doing them for years, but no one ever saw them. No one even knew she painted them, but she didn't burn them or bury them. She left them in the attic for someone to find. You know, now I made that up too, but the analogy is this: we want people to see it. We as artists, we really want people to see it. The question is how do you compress or decompress time so that you get time on task with people? You know, I look at it like this: time is my friend. I'm pushing 80, okay? I don't have a whole lot longer left on this planet, but my art's got years and years and years and years left on this planet. You know, how many years? Well, long as somebody's around to love it, I guess. You know, if it's taken care of, it can last 1,000 years or whatever, you know, but I'm just simply saying that the time that people can see it, is one person enough? Or are you willing to get collectively 10,000 people over the next 5 years or the next 20 years or how long you can project out? I do that with time. Listen, I just finished a piece that I started. I started the piece, 35, 40 years ago. I've got literally, I had the components in the early 80s. I made all the components. I shoved it aside because I was too anxious to go to something else. So I went to something else over and over and over and over until, 45 years passes.
Wow.
And now I look back and I say, oh man, I got to finish that. Well, how do you date something like that? I mean, how do you, where do you place that in the strata of the evolution? It's all a strange thing, the whole business about how many I think it takes 3 people literally to make an audience. If we used to do performances out at Lawndale, we'd have incredible performances. And we did some that really didn't work too well, to tell you the truth. I mean, sometimes they were not the best. And sometimes they were absolutely world-class great. But the difference between those, I always thought, man, the worst thing we did was great. Just simply because we gave someone a chance, and if we had 3 people, then we would say, yay!
Yes. I can vouch for that firsthand. Yeah, some of the best shows we've done, unfortunately, it was for two cockroaches and a grasshopper out there, but boy, we sure did feel good about it. James, I think that's a great segue in terms of condensing and controlling time. There is so much stuff I would love to ask, and I hope at some point we get a chance to come together in person, because I'd love to pick your brain some more about some of these great things. And I noticed that you haven't even taken a bite of your breakfast burrito yet, so I'll try to wrap this up and see if we can't get back to our lunch.
Okay.
You've got all kinds of great pieces in Dallas-Fort Worth right now. I believe you have your Vase of Nine. Am I saying that right? Downtown Fort Worth. You've also got some stuff at the Holocaust Museum and up in Denton. Is that correct?
I do, yes.
Nice. And so, James, how and where can people find you and keep up with your fantastic work?
Well, I have a website that my wonderful daughter keeps up. I think that's a good way. You know, I am making little short videos now that we are about to start posting. Some are just sort of, I dreamed a dream. You know,
Nice.
here's something I would really like to do. I just made a video about a sculpture that I want to make for San Angelo, Texas.
Awesome.
You know, I just kind of made that up as well.
Right?
And I would really love to have a major sculpture in San Angelo, because I really want to have a major sculpture kind of in the heart of what I call the West Texas.
Yep.
You know?
Awesome. Now, is your website jamessurls.com?
Yeah.
And spell your last name for me.
Surls.
Perfect. We'll try to get some comments up in the areas below and see if we can't guide some people to some of the fantastic stuff that you've brought to us down here in Texas. James, do you have any words of wisdom, any final thoughts for everybody out there going through this last month of 2020?
No. Bear with it. Do your best, and ask yourself if what you're taking into the future has to do with greed or giving. That's just a fair question.
And a great one.
You know, are you trying to help or hinder? You know, are you trying to elevate or descend? I mean, I would put some kind of meaningful personal scale on where you are and what you're doing and what, you know, in the who am I question. You know, a lot of people are really having to are reevaluating that. You know, no, I don't have any advice.
Well, I think you might have given us one or two great little gold nuggets, even if you don't want to admit it. So it's certainly something that I'm going to take with me over the course of the next few days and see if I can't gauge my own self-worth for myself. So, James, do you mind if I ask you to unwrap that breakfast burrito so we can get a little peek at that before we wrap this up? Gorgeous. All right, I'm going to give you a little insight to my stir fry here. There's what I ended up going with there. Turned out pretty good. Put a little bit of hot sauce on there.
I bet it did, yeah.
James, I'm so grateful to you for taking the time. This has just been an absolute pleasure. And again, I look forward to seeing your new work and revisiting your older stuff as well. So just very glad you took the time, and certainly wish all the best to you and your lovely wife up there in Colorado.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. All right, everybody, that wraps up another edition of Box Lunch. We'll be back next Monday as we continue to work our way through 2020. I want to wish everybody the best. Please stay safe, be kind to yourselves, be kind to others, and bon appetit, everybody. We'll see you again real soon. Bye-bye, everyone.